Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to today's webinar on Selling Yourself, the Art of Science and Getting Ahead with Roger Granis. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and within a few days, you will receive an email with both the slides and the recording. You can ask any questions using the Q&A box on your screen, and Roger will answer as many questions as possible during his presentation. My name is Michelle, and I oversee the education and professional certification products and services at the IEEE Computer Society. Each month, we host webinars focused on essential business skills designed to help you excel in your current role and support your career growth. Today, you'll learn how to get ahead, and the IEEE Computer Society will help you stay ahead. Our Career Center offers various resources to help you stay in the game, including resume guidance, career advice, U.S. job posting, and more. Start advancing your career today at careers.computer.org. Joining us today is Roger Granis, principal of Granis Group since 2005. Roger understands engineers and has dedicated his career to helping them communicate more effectively. He has also improved business performance at some of the biggest names such as GE, Underwriting Laboratories, Semantics, Pepsi, Royal Bank of Scotland, Foot Locker, and Synchrony. Roger, thank you for presenting today. The floor is yours.
Michelle, thank you. Appreciate it. Good to be back with my friends at IEEE. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Scott Levine. All right, let's get started. Selling Yourself, the Art and Science of Getting Ahead. So I want to consider this to be like a fireside chat. Imagine we've sat down in my den and you said, Roger, hey, I'd like to advance my career. I'd like to get a job. I'd like to get a promotion. I'd like to get a raise. What advice do you have for me? So consider this a one-on-one dialogue. And I invite you to, as we go, type in any question that you have. I'd love this to be personalized and certainly dedicated to you so that you get something out of this. Now, at the beginning of all of these webinars, I always say that my heart goes out to you all because my father there on the right, Roland Granis, there's me back in the day. He was a member of IEEE, and one night a month, he would go to San Francisco, where I grew up, and go to the evening dinner and guest speaker. In fact, one of the guest speakers way back in 1981 was my boss, Adam Osborne, inventor of the first portable computer. So I worked for Adam, and thankfully he said good things about me to the audience, and my dad was sitting there. All right, let's warm up with our knowledge of computer science. Here is our first polling question. Number one, who is considered the father of computer science? Charles Babbage, Alan Turing, John von Neumann, Albert Einstein, or Adam Osborne? So type in your answer. This is going to encourage us to be interactive here. All right. Please type in your answers. And I think good. A couple of you've responded. Let's get the numbers up. 11%. Let's go for at least 15%, shall we? Oh, there we go, 24%. Got a couple more. Anybody else? Going for 40%. All right, we're 42%. Great. The answer is Alan Turing is considered the father of computer science. But I can see the argument for the other two, and thank you for participating. Let's go to one other question related to computer science. Which woman is recognized for her pioneering work on the programming language COBOL? Ada Lovelace, Frances Allen, Diane Hopper, Melinda Gates, or Adele Goldberg? Okay, going to Melinda Gates, the former wife of Bill Gates. Did she work on COBOL? I don't know. Let's see what the surveys say. Thought it would be fun to warm up with a little bit of trivia today. All righty. There we go. We've got 40% of you. Let's see. Diane Hopper is the correct answer, but we've got fairly even distribution between Ada and Diane. And somebody voted for Melinda Gates as well. She did not work on the COBOL language. All right, and then our final question, this is more steering now into our audience. Who are you, so that I can customize my remarks to the in the right way. Who are you? Where are you in your career? Student, PhD candidate, entry level, team lead, supervisor, manager, director, C-suite, retired, or other. And if you're an other, just type it in the chat box. All right, so we've got 2% of you have answered. This is not a trick question, just doing a survey to find out where you are in your journey. All right, we've hit 45%. Let's keep this train moving forward. All right, gonna move the camera here for a second. All right, so it looks like a lot of team leads, managers, some senior executives, director, C-suite. Some of you in the student range, between student and PhD candidates, and a couple of retirees. Welcome all. Thank you. All right, here's our outline for our session today. We want to talk about you and how do you market yourself? How do you sell yourself? It starts with knowing yourself. So we'll spend a little bit of time identifying who you are, what you want to do with your life, your career. Second, prepare yourself. What are your key selling points? Let's get real clear on those so that we can pull from those and customize your conversations and your messaging. How do you describe yourself in a way that's enticing and gets people to say yes? Then we'll talk about expanding your network. How do you go about doing that? Because ultimately, people need people, and we've got to expand our network if we want to sell ourselves and do a little bit more with our lives and our careers. And then we'll talk specifically about how to have that sales conversation. And then finally, the importance of standing up for yourself and some tidbits, some insights on that. Oh, Adam, thank you, John. Adam Grace Hopper. Sounds like I don't have the full, or ADM Grace Hopper. John, tell me more about that. And I'll certainly do some research afterwards to make sure I've got the right answer moving forward. But thank you for that. All right, so let's begin with knowing yourself. So here's the deal. If you want to sell yourself, you've got to know who you are. Take some time to do some introspection. And I know I've got with my engineer friends, oftentimes I'll hear them say, well, gee, I'm an engineer. I don't know what I want to do. And so I'd encourage you to listen to that voice inside. What's pulling at your heartstrings? What gets you excited about when you see somebody else doing something that perhaps you like? What is it about that job, that role, that culture that you like? So ultimately, what do you want? What do you enjoy? What's your ideal work environment? And I'd encourage you to write it down on put it on your phone. I like to use index cards. I've got them all over my office. What are the key things I'd like to do? And I look at them twice a day. Now, there's this thing called the law of attraction. And very simply put, it says this. If you think about what you want, you're very specific, and you write it down, the universe will start delivering it to you. Does it happen every time? Maybe not, but I have had a lot of success doing this. I'll give you a perfect example, and I'm going to come back to this example a few times throughout this presentation. So I'm a creative person, and frankly, I wanted to do something super creative with my career. Maybe acting, writing, comedy, something in that overall arc of show business. Well, my dad was an engineer. My mom suffered through the Great Depression with very little money. And so her idea of me going into something unstable like Hollywood was just unthinkable. So she said, you need to go into sales. So I've had that desire to do creative things. And I have, through my career, found a way to have like normal day jobs satisfy that need. Again, I'll reference those later. And some of the opportunities I've had have come to me because I wrote them down. All right, well, what if you don't know? Again, I touched on this just a second ago, but talk to people, have informal meetings with them, read about careers, take classes, listen to podcasts. There are so many really good podcasts out there that you can learn about what somebody's job is like firsthand, going into great detail. Maybe attend events, association events, conferences, and take time to talk to other people, get some ideas. A career, like anything, takes patience and persistence. Now, some of you music lovers out there will know this is the cover of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Well, guess how many albums they released before Dark Side of the Moon? It was 7. It took them 8 albums, 7 plus Dark Side of the Moon, to hit it big. We've heard lots of stories about people who were an overnight success, and the interviewer says, "How did you do it?" And they say, "Well, 10 years of hard work without giving up." So let me just touch on my career. Now, I just mentioned, I'm telling you, the inner secrets of Roger here, that I've got this desire to be creative. And so I started out in sales, working for Adam Osborne. He had a publishing company that published computer books, the Apple II User Guide, the IBM User Guide, book on VisiCalc, many books on programming to simplify the complex. So I loved it. And then I moved to work for Gartner. I moved across the country from San Francisco to Connecticut near New York City to go to work for Gartner. And I started out in Gartner is a technology research company, if you're not familiar. And that was in the late 80s. Well, I started out in sales, and then I moved into sales training. So leveraging my background in sales, and I did some part-time sales training out in San Francisco, I was able to move a little bit closer to my ideal job, which is being creative. A lot of creativity in sales, so I could leverage my experience, plus bring in a lot of show business elements, standing up in front of people, creating interesting, interactive online training. And ultimately, I started interviewing our technical experts on, back then, cassette tape. And it turns out people outside of Gartner liked them. I turned it into a product, and voila, I became a host of an audio news magazine. Today, you'd call it basically it is a podcast today, but it went from cassette tape to CD to online. And then out of that, they said to Roger, "You're good in front of people. Would you like to host a conference with Steve Ballmer, CEO of Microsoft, on stage in front of 10,000 people?" I said, "Sure." So what I'm saying is, if you know what you like to do and that itch isn't scratched enough, find out ways within your current job to do a little bit about what you love and write it down. So these things came to me because that's really, I spent a lot of time thinking about, I want to satisfy this creative itch. So write it down, find ways to expand your universe where you are right now. You don't have to get divorced. You don't have to leave your job and go live in the mountains if you want to become a writer. There are ways to do it right now at work and in your spare time, or whatever it is you like to do. All right, so again, building on a foundation of knowing yourself, what is it you want to do, and who can hire me or pay me, who can I volunteer to do this work? Now, we want to have a conversation with them. We want to get their interest and ultimately convince them that I'm the person that will do this work for you. So we want to prepare ourselves, and much like a product manager would do, much like a salesperson would do, we need to identify our key selling points. one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of people make, and candidly engineers, because you're also smart, is we we have so many ideas, so many key selling points, we tend to say too much. What we want to do is think about it as a pyramid. We want to find the most enticing, exciting selling points and have those in our knowledge base so that when it comes time to describe what we can do, sell ourselves, get somebody to talk to us, we can pull out from that list, that menu of selling points, and use those to advance our cause. So how do we go about doing this? We want to look at these selling points, think about our work experience, our skills, any volunteer work we may have done, because that makes us appear to be a more interesting, well-rounded person, and maybe extracurriculars, hobbies. What do you like to do in your free time? Especially today, people are looking for not just robots, but real humans. And when we bring up interesting volunteer work, it creates an emotional connection. When we bring up an interesting extracurricular, if the person we're talking to has a similar interest, they'll feel connected to us and will be more likely to want to work with us, to hire us. Extracurriculars are also a way of having a conversation about something that's exciting to us, and it might ease any nervousness we might have before talking about the work experience and the skills. What we want to do is find talking points, this foundation that get attention, get people's interest, and get them saying, I would like to learn more. And we want this list to be measured. These are specific, clear, measurable results. And we'll talk about how to craft those in a little bit. Again, I want to emphasize that we want to appear to be human to them. So we want to be authentic. Okay, it's okay to show a flaw or two, or talk about what you like to do outside of work. And we want these talking points, if we can find the fresh and the unusual, because we want to stand out from other people. Now, just as an example, before we started today, Scott Levine, who's a producer on this show, was telling me that he lives in a building in the Washington, D.C. area that's very social. And when he was hosting one of these webinars, just like today, there was somebody in his building who's also an engineer, and say, hey, Scott, guess where I saw you this morning on one of these shows. So that unusual tidbit stood out from all the normal business conversation that we're having. It helped humanize Scott. It helped make our connection stronger. All right, so here are my key selling points, and I'm going to give other examples too, but I know myself best, so I want to give you this as an example. So when it came time for me to approach IEEE about maybe doing some of these webinars, the first thing I mentioned was my father was a lifetime member of IEEE. Again, something in common, build that emotional human connection. I also mentioned the word Gartner. You're a computer society. Gartner is world renowned as technology advisors. I mentioned I was in sales, that I started Gartner Sales University. I started the media business, and I've done 70 association speeches on these topics. And I'm an author of a book called The Yellow Cake Principle. So again, I've taken that long list of things I've done. I've left out some of the failures, but I've taken out that long list. I said, all right, what are the most compelling, intriguing selling points from my background? What's got the most sizzle? And I listed them so that I knew what they were. And again, I could pull from them later. All right, here's another example of somebody, I'm making this up, somebody named Mark. I actually used artificial intelligence to come up with a sample resume, and here's what came out on that resume. Yeah, he attended Stanford University, got a master's in computer engineering. He's a senior computer engineer. He can program in these languages. He recently did a project for AI-powered chatbot, and then the human element. He hiked the John Muir Trail, and he's the first generation college grad. Now, the first 4 bullets would apply to many, many people. Now, Stanford is an exclusive university, so, okay, maybe everyone didn't go to Stanford, but the point I want to make here is this. If you want to stand out from the crowd, we want to hear about more of you than just your education and technical prowess, because a lot of people fit those bills. But notice how you might have felt when I said he hiked the John Muir Trail and is the first generation college grad. That creates an emotional response. It made him human. It might move his resume to the top of the pile. See what I'm saying? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I recently hired 2 summer interns, and I was looking for somebody who could update my mailing list. So I wanted somebody that had worked with Excel, had organized spreadsheets. Here's a resume of somebody who was top of the list. She attends a college not far from my house. She does exactly what I'm looking for: updated logs and databases, organized spreadsheets. My gosh, she knew somebody I know. Her mother knows a fellow I know in a men's group I belong to. I asked candidates to complete an assignment. She did it, and she lives nearby. But she had the right selling points for what I was looking for. Here's another person that I hired as well this summer. Attended a college, happened to be Bentley University up near Boston. I did my TEDx talk at Bentley University a couple years ago. So that's something in common. People like people who are like them. And if you've got something in common with somebody, we feel a human connection. By gosh, he's a member of Kappa Sigma. That's the same fraternity I belonged to in college. Again, something in common. He interned last summer at the company that does my taxes. I was able to call that company and say, hey, you've worked with Tom. What's he like? So I was able to get a non-biased opinion of his work. And one of his key selling points, last summer he worked on 50 plus Excel spreadsheets. He too completed the assignment. So these detailed and specific things on the resume jump out. Again, that 50 Excel spreadsheets. That he didn't just say something general like knows Excel and Word and PowerPoint. 50 Excel spreadsheets, measurable, specific. The specific jumps out. Same thing with the other woman I hired, updated logs and databases, and she actually included more information in that resume line. All right, so we want to know ourselves. What do we want? We want to get that list of key selling points. And now, before we have the conversation, we want to think about, all right, who can I talk to? How do I go about expanding my network? So I mentioned that I belong to this men's group, and it's a charitable organization, and we meet once a week. And there's a fellow in that group named Jim, good friend of mine. He moved from here. He's now in the Carolinas. But he's an independent worker just like me. And a couple of times over our friendship over the last few years, he said, Roger, I don't have any business. What do I do? And every time I tell him this same thing, and he tells me it works. Make a list of 100 people you know and contact them. Just reach out and say, hi, thinking about you, wanted to find out how you're doing. Maybe you'll end up having a conversation with those people, but you're not pressuring them. You're not saying, I need work. What should I do? You're reaching out, saying hi, and asking how they're doing, and perhaps having a conversation. When they say how they're doing, they'll ask you, how are you doing? Hey, I'm doing so on and so forth. One of the things I'm looking to do now is get a raise, get a promotion, switch jobs, get more business. And then they'll say, oh, tell me more about that. and you're off to the races, and they might give you some ideas. But there's something magic about having that list of 100. Now, I've mentioned this to many other people. Sometimes I hear them say this, Roger, I don't know 100 people I can contact. And they say this in a room with 40 people. I'm like, well, there are 39 other people in here you could say hello to during the coffee break. Oh, Admiral, thank you. Great. I'm just looking at the chat box. So just the abbreviation for Grace Hopper is Admiral Grace Hopper. Thank you. Thank you for that, John. All right. So how do you find your list of 100 people? Colleagues, classmates, neighbors, professionals, club members. If you belong to a religious group, your house of worship, even complete strangers. The guy that fixes my air conditioning at my house is somebody I started talking to in the aisle at Home Depot, a home improvement store. Turns out he's an air conditioning repair person. Here's the key point I want to make about this. When you expand your network, don't just think about people you went to school with and your people that you've worked with. Everybody you know has close friends. They can introduce you to people who have what you need. Let me give you two examples. One, I just lost the thought on that one. Okay, here we go. So when I left Gartner and I went out on my own, somebody gave me this advice. Don't just talk to people you've worked with, talk to anybody you know. Your dentist, your doctor, neighbors, hairdresser, what have you. So my wife used to take karate. She's I think a 4th degree black belt. She can kill me, and someday she wants to. Not really. And anyway, so she took karate, and she would commute with a guy named Steve. And my wife said, do you want me to mention to Steve that you're out on your own and you're looking for consulting assignments? I said, sure, why not? Turns out Steve was a senior executive at GE, a global Fortune 50 powerhouse. Steve introduced me to somebody else, and GE gave me steady consulting work for about 5 years. Now, if I hadn't thought about networking with somebody outside of that work circle, I would have never had that opportunity at GE. So reach out, and you've got to have the nerve, the confidence, get over your nervousness to reach out and say hi to people. Okay? The other example is this. I mentioned Hollywood. I'd like to do creative work. So because I live close to New York City, I've been in a couple movies as an extra. No talking lines, very little pay, but I got to be on the set, Meryl Streep, some other people. So it was kind of fun. Again, it scratched that itch. And the guy that painted my house 3 years ago is an actor. So he paints to pay the bills in between acting gigs. And he said he was working on a short movie with a friend of his named Brian. And I said, hey, is there any chance I could be an unpaid helper? I will buy lunch for the crew for the 3-day shoot. He said, well, let me mention it to Brian. I'll see what I can do. So Brian said, we could always use an extra hand. Why not? Well, because I had the desire, I've done some educational work on this, I've seen big movie sets, I knew exactly what Brian needed as a director. So he liked what I did so much, I have now worked on 3 other short movies for him. Again, I'm not getting paid. I don't care. It's just a lot of fun. And it's scratching that itch. But if I had not mentioned it to the guy painting my house, I would have not had that opportunity. Again, I go back to the law of attraction because it was constantly on my mind. The universe, excuse me, brought that opportunity to me. All right, let's say you want to look for new work. And some of this might be super familiar to you, but I want to make sure I cover it for everybody on here who might be earlier in their career cycle, their career path. So, um, how do you find job openings? Uh, Programs, companies like LinkedIn, Indeed. You can look at company sites, job openings. I would create a target list of companies you want to work for. Now, where do you get the target list? Well, because you've been talking to people, you've been networking, you've been reading. That's how I find the work. The work at Gartner. I was reading in Business Week magazine back in 1987 a list of fastest growing companies in the United States. And one of them was Gartner Technology Research. I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm selling technology books. It's a lot like technology research. They're growing fast. Why don't I check there? Well, they didn't have a website, but I phoned the company. They said, well, as a matter of fact, we are looking for salespeople right now. So having that target list, your circle of acquaintances, put the word out. Uh, Attend association and networking events. Volunteering. You could, much like I did, volunteer to work on the movie. You could volunteer to work for somebody, volunteer to work for an organization. You could post or publish information online. You could send articles to people that are working at that organization. Use LinkedIn to find out who the hiring managers are. Contact them directly. Maybe you want to do something extra at work. When I was at Gartner, I started volunteering for the sales events, doing recordings, and they saw that I could do this work, and so they created jobs for me to do internally at Gartner. All right, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. All right, so have that foundation of knowing yourself, understanding your key talking points, your key selling points, making a list of people you can contact. All right, so how do we reach out and have that conversation, whether it's an informational interview or a job interview or something along those lines? But let's dig deeper into that. So one of the webinars I've done that Scott and Michelle have available to you at IEEE Computer Society is conversation skills. So this is a quick summary of what I covered in there, but I'd encourage you to go to the database, and if you want to learn more, look at that full webinar. But if you net out everything I've learned over my 40-year career in selling and communication skills, how do you influence people? How do you have that conversation? It's 3 simple key steps. Think of it as a 3-layer cake. At the bottom, we've got the foundation of connect. We want to make a true human-to-human connection. Before talking about yourself and your great attributes, you want to establish rapport with that person. It might be a little bit of small talk. It might be talking about an extracurricular activity. It might be talking about the weather, but something to, as we say here in the States, break the ice. Establish that relationship before you move the conversation forward. Then take time to understand them. Learn about the other person first. What's going on in their world? What are their priorities? What are they looking for in a person? And then customize your presentation. That's where you're going to pull out the key talking points that will make the most sense to that person, that will get them to say yes faster and more readily. All right, let's dig a little bit deeper into each of those 3 steps. Again, the first thing is make that connection. In the world of baking, it's like preheating the oven. We want to warm up the relationship before getting into the more serious stuff. Now, admittedly, some people want to get to the serious stuff first. We'll talk about that in a minute, that some people want you to get right to the point. But still, you want to take some time to establish that connection with the person before steering the conversation. Now, to begin with, we've got to get their attention, because when we send an email to somebody, stop them at the supermarket, or call them on the phone, their minds are on something else. We want to get their attention, get them focused on us, and then get that connection made. In my experience, you've got about 3 seconds to say something or write something that will get their mind off themselves onto you. If you hold them for 3 seconds, they'll stay with you for another 10. If that next 10 seconds is good, they'll stay with you for another 30 seconds and so forth. The point is, we want to get their attention and then begin transitioning the conversation to what is on our minds. So let's go back to our example of Mark, the computer engineer, and we're going to pull out 2 of his selling points. We're not going to mention all of them. Remember, if we say everything, we're going to put people to sleep. So we want to pull out 2 with the most sizzle and then incorporate those into an email, okay? Again, building from that foundation, we don't want to say everything. We want to think about the person we're targeting and say, all right, what would most likely get their attention? And we've decided that the Stanford background and the experience with the AI-powered chatbot are the most relevant. Let me just step aside for a minute. I mentioned earlier that one of the interns coming to work for me was in the same college fraternity, Kappa Sigma. If he had written me an email and mentioned, hey, I saw you're also a member of Kappa Sigma, that would have established a really fast connection because we like people who've got similar backgrounds. All right, let's come back into this example with Mark. We want to write an email that's going to get somebody's attention and get them to agree to working with us. All right, so he's sending an email to somebody named Wendy. He read about Wendy online. He did some research, found out she went to Stanford, just like Mark, and he's going to write her an email trying to get a meeting with her to get some career advice. Make sense? Okay, so we want to mention something in the subject line that's going to get her attention. So, fellow Stanford grad, seems pretty good to me. Another one might be, would love your advice. People love to talk about themselves, want to give people advice. So I think one of those would certainly get Wendy's attention, get her to say, all right, let me read this email. It doesn't sound like spam. Here's how it's going to go. Hi, Wendy. Wendy, we have something in common. We both graduated from Stanford. I'm super impressed with your career trajectory. Any chance I could buy you a cup of coffee and get your perspective? I just completed an AI-powered chatbot project for TechX, made-up company, and am at a crossroads. Your insights would be invaluable, and I'd be happy to share what I'm hearing on the front lines as well, if that would be helpful. So we've found something in common, we've stroked her ego a little bit, and we've offered to share any insights from us as well. Seems like this is a win-win, an easy yes for Wendy, right? We even mentioned her name twice. Hi, Wendy. Wendy, we have something in common. We didn't beat around the bush. We said we have something in common. Remember, we want to find something in common with people. Mentioned that early on. So that's our email. I think it's a good model. Take that, modify it for your own use. Again, to underscore the principle here, pulling from your nugget, finding what's most interesting for the person where you want to target, and mentioning it up front. Let me slip in another example here. So when I lived in San Francisco, and I got married out there, and my wife wanted a new job, wanted to switch fields, and she had worked in the hotel business in New York City for many years. So we went through this exercise. What are your key selling points? What's something you can say in the first 3 seconds? And she said, well, I worked at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. I'm like, wow, that is a big name. Let's mention that first in the phone call. Remember, we want to get somebody's attention with something that sizzles. So her phone call went something like this. Hey, Bob. Bob, I worked at the Waldorf Astoria for 3 years in convention services, and I recently moved to San Francisco. Wanted to see if we might sit down and have a conversation. I'm looking for work. You may not be looking for somebody right now, but perhaps in your circle of colleagues, you might know somebody who does. Any chance we could sit down for 15 minutes? I'll be in San Francisco next Monday. Something like that, right? We want to get the word Waldorf Astoria up front. it got the person's attention, and he almost hired her over the phone on the spot. All right. So Wendy has agreed to meet with us. We've talked about the weather a little bit. We talked about what years we worked at Stanford, who our favorite professors were, a little bit about warm-up conversation. And then you're going to say something like this. We're steering from the connect step, transitioning into the understand step. We will say something like this. Wendy, thanks for meeting with me. I would love to learn more about your career and the criteria you used when deciding your next move. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions? Now, why do we want to do this? Because otherwise, it's just random. We're all over the map. There's no structure to the conversation. You might be tempted to interject too much. The goal here is to get the other person sharing what's important to you. What are you looking for? How did you figure out your career? How did you ask for a promotion? Where did you find your job leads? We want to get them sharing. It makes them feel good. People love to be listened to, and it gives you the information you need. Then if it's appropriate that you're going to pitch yourself with whatever it is you're promoting, then you know what they're looking for, and you can link your talking points back to what they have said. Okay? The other thing it does is it sets up the conversation. It sets up an agreement that for the next few minutes, I'm going to be asking the questions and you're going to be doing the talking, and she's agreeing to that. So it just sets it up a much more open environment where she's willing to share. Make sense? Hope so. Again, feel free to type in any questions. All right, so we're moving now firmly into that understand step. But I want you to think of this part of the conversation like a funnel. We want to start with broad, open-ended questions that get her sharing. She's probably going to give you all the information you know if you just get her talking. Okay, so we want to distinguish between two types of questions. Tactical questions, which elicit short answers. How soon, how many, which one do you prefer? Versus strategic questions. These are open-ended. They encourage long answers. They're at the top of the funnel. Tell me about your vision. What are your top 3 strategic priorities? If we could do this, how would that impact that? Now, those aren't the questions that we're going to use for Wendy, but they're examples of the types of questions you might use in any situation. Cocktail party with your boss. Let's say, for example, you're working on a business unit within your organization that said, we need a new software solution for our security. Great. Then you're going to say, I would love to learn your requirements, what you're hoping for, what are some of the security issues you've had in the past. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions? They say yes, and then you launch into these open-ended questions. Let them dish it all out. Let them share in a lot of detail. Encourage them to keep going. Confirm for understanding. All right, this is where we want to ask Wendy some questions. This is an informal, informational interview. Wendy, tell me about you. How did you decide on your career path? What happened to you once you left Stanford? What sort of criteria did you use for making career moves? What rewards and challenges have you faced along the way? What advice would you have for somebody like myself in this position? Thank you for sharing, Wendy. Is there anything I can do to help you? You've been most kind. What can I do to help you? Well, Mark, Bob, Scott, Michelle, some days I feel a little bit out of touch with what's going on in the programming world. What are you finding? What are engineers, what's keeping engineers up at night? What keeps them working for the same company and so forth? What challenges are they facing? So now you're offering something back. And certainly you're going to send a thank you note to Wendy for spending that time with you. All right. In fact, Wendy, here's the good news. Wendy loved this conversation with Mark, with us, so much. She said, you know, Mark, we're actually looking for somebody with your background. Can you tell me a little bit more about you? I would have to sell you to my team members. What are your key selling points? Why would they want to hire you? Okay, now we've got all this information from Wendy, so we can feed her specific talking points that link to everything she's told us so that it's very focused and targeted. And it gets away from that saying too much information that will put her to sleep. So we want to focus our presentation, our description about us. Okay. Now, one of the other webinars that I've done is the 4 languages of influence. This content is really good and it goes into super detail. I'd encourage you to watch that program as well. I'm going to give you some highlights here. Here's the key point. Not everybody speaks the same language. There are 4 languages of influence. If we take the first letter of each of those languages, it spells the word sold, S-O-L-D. And this is key. I've done this all over the world, and this nugget of insight right here is one of the ones that people tell me, it's like, wow, I wish I'd known this 30 years ago. This is life-changing. Here are the 4 languages. If we start in the upper left, moving clockwise, I guess going this way on the camera, steadfast, outgoing, loving, and detail-oriented. Here are 4 people that speak in these styles. Steadfast, Hillary Clinton, direct and to the point, bullet points. Kevin Hart, who's a well-known comedian and actor, outgoing. Think Robin Williams. Think somebody who's like Elton John, lively and outgoing. Loving, quiet, soft-spoken, Mother Teresa, Gandhi. The detail-oriented person is like Spock, logical, lots and lots of details. So here's a quick summary of what they want. Steadfast folks want bullet points and bottom line. The outgoing want fun and possibilities. The loving folks care about relationships and people. The detail-oriented folks they do want that long list of everything. Here's how we would pull from our key selling points and change our description for each of those 4 people. Steadfast person, if we look at the lower left, they want bullet points and bottom line. So you would simply be direct and to the point. I managed a team of 10 engineers. I architected cloud-based systems, reducing costs by 25%. Recently, I integrated AI and machine learning algorithms. That's it. Say no more. Bullet points, bottom line. Somebody like Kevin Hart, Robin Williams. I want to be energetic and fun. Hey, I turned things around. Morale was at an all-time low. People were leaving. I pulled everyone together and I said, hey, what do we need to do to make this place hum again? They all said 3 things, and we implemented these things. First of all, we put in place a First Fridays program, party every Friday afternoon. It boosted morale 32%. I put in place a flexible work schedule. Turnover stopped. In fact, 5 programmers came back. We eliminated work silos, and we got people working together again. Oh, and for fun, what do? Well, I love backpacking. My wife and I hiked the John Muir Trail. So good. See the difference? A little more fun, a little more fluid. The loving people, we want to emphasize relationships, connectivity between people, among people. It pained me to see my friends leaving and morale so low. So I volunteered and I led a cross-functional team to get at the root of the problem. What we heard was people didn't feel valued. So we put together a campaign called People First. And gosh, I'm happy to say it worked. Morale went up 32%. people stopped leaving. In fact, 5 people came back. We restructured so people would work as a team, not in silos. And one thing I'm really proud of at my company is it really helps us work together better. The first Friday of every month, we take turns serving at the local soup kitchen. See the difference? People, harmony. Now, for the Spock folks, the detail folks, this is where you want to bring out your inner engineer. They do want to hear all the details. If you fluff over it, they're going to think you haven't done your homework. All right, let's wrap it up. Let's bring the train home. And standing up for yourself. As I mentioned earlier, one of the secrets to selling yourself is simply asking. And to be honest, I have wrestled with this all my life. I was shy and introverted as a kid, and picking up the phone and asking people for anything was a challenge. I've worked really hard to overcome that. Have I completely overcome it? No, some days it's that phone is really heavy. But here's what I think about when I feel that way. It's all a numbers game. Every no you get is one step closer to a yes. Out of those 100 people you contact, 7 people every time will be super thrilled to hear from you and will probably have a lead or something for you themselves. It takes practice. Take public speaking classes, take communication skills training, join Toastmasters, and volunteer. Volunteering is a great way to expand your network, build your confidence, and certainly help make the world a better place. Now, you've heard about the elevator pitch. What is it? It's simply a short paragraph when people say, hey, tell me about yourself. If you're at a cocktail party, you're at an association event, you're at a job interview, this is what you say up front. Your name, what you do, who you serve, what makes you different, and a personal insight. It would go something like this. Hey, I'm Mark Epstein. I'm a senior computer engineer at TechX. I lead a team of people that develops applications that ultimately help our marketing team get a higher response rate. People tell me I'm technical and easy to work with. Outside of work, I love to hike. After college, my wife and I hiked the John Muir Trail. I think the thing I'm most proud of in my life is that I'm the first person in my family that went to college. Succinct, conversational, you're planting seeds, you're hitting the highlights. And it's the same content you would use on your About section on LinkedIn. Conversational, look at the data here. You've got some numbers, you've got some personal tidbit. Notice how this last part pulls at the heartstrings. I'm a first generation college graduate. Wow. That, people buy with emotion. So having that emotional appeal is important. And then you'll mention these bullet points in your resume, right? Here are a couple of examples. Here are the 2 interns I hired. Again, that first bullet point, updated logs and databases, enhancing accuracy and efficiency, which had not yet been updated since 2021. Look at that specificity. Okay, let's go to the second person. First bullet point, developed and delivered 50 plus Excel spreadsheets for accounting colleagues, enabling enhanced financial analysis and efficient tax form preparation. Here's what I love about this. It's specific. He mentions a number. He says what he did, who it's for, and what it did for them. What was the benefit? So we want to avoid generic in a resume, and we want to be specific. Now here's the model, or here's the resume that Chat GPT created for Mark. But look at it's generic. Programming languages, okay, a lot of people could have done that. Web development, yeah, a lot of people could have done that. Database management, cloud, it's too generic. It's too generic. You want to put in some who you did it for, how long did it take, what was the payoff, 30% reduction in this, 40% gain in that. Be specific, give me some numbers. All right, here's from my resume way back when. Okay, created, produced, and hosted Talking Technology. Okay, 22,000 senior IT professionals. Bullet 2, generated 5 million in annual revenues. Okay, final bullet, reduced production budget 23%. Okay, numbers, specific. You want to stand out from the crowd. Again, look at this resume here. Okay, you might get lucky. The auto resume scanners might pick up on this, move you into the pile, but you want to go to the top of the pile. You want to stand above the crowd. So having these specific accomplishments with numbers attached, who it was for, will help you do that. Again, this is from Mark, that AI generated resume. Provided mentor and guidance. Okay, this isn't bad. Provide mentorship and guidance to aspiring developers. Okay, that makes you sound like a nice person. Conduct workshops. Okay, not bad. Went above and beyond, sounds like. Going down to the bottom. Hiking and outdoor activities. Too bland. No. Backpacked 1,000 miles with my son's scout troop. Wow. Okay. Reading science fiction novels. Okay, maybe. You could make it more specific. Avid reader of, and then name the authors. Big fan of, so forth. Be specific. All right, well, that's it, and we're right on time. Happy to stick around and answer any questions. I always offer this at the end of my talk. This is a summary of my best knowledge. It's called the Yellow Cake Principle, the recipe for influence. Just send me an email. I don't put you on an email list. We send you that article as a thank you. Just put in the subject line IEEE CS. And it's a 5-page easy read. Again, summarizing, connect, understand, present, where the story came from. Also got the book on Amazon if you're interested. I'd love to get some more Amazon reviews if you feel so inclined. And I would also, if you want to, oh, that's you. There we go. Oh, yeah, there I am. Connect on LinkedIn, or just type in Roger Granis on LinkedIn. There I am. So have you gained anything out of this? I hope so. I would love to hear from you in the chat. What was the one key takeaway today? Was it being more specific in your resume? Was it feeling more confident about maybe expanding your network? What was it? What did you get out of our session today? Love to hear it.
We do have one question, Roger.
Great.
It says, do you suggest a book to help me in the transition from analytics to manager?
Analyst to manager. So a book on leadership, perhaps? Is that what we're looking for? Good question. Good question. My focus is not on leadership, but Edgardo, if you could, can you send me an email? I'd be happy to research that for you. I've got a lot of leadership colleagues and would love to answer that question. So send me an email, roger@granisgroup.com. I will send you a couple of book recommendations, if that's okay. Thank you for the question. Oh, I see that the questions come at the top. We go in reverse order here. Okay, I'm scrolling the wrong way. All right, I'm just going to go back again. If you want the article, there's the subject line and the email address. Anybody else happy to stick around for a couple of minutes? Any feedback? Any nuggets? And yes, Kapil, if I'm pronouncing that right, you will get a recording.
I see one under the chat, attendees chat, from Caroline. It says, I once made my resume detail and I was told that you need to be precise. I cut it down to 2 pages and got thumbs up. Ideally, how do you say that MS Excel, XML, YAML, Adobe Suite, Network, etc., while adding every other detail about them while maintaining 2 pages.
Yeah. So yes, I think 2 pages is great. I think a couple things. One is you want to in the some of the bullet points go beyond the general. So Adobe, Excel, Microsoft, yeah, proficient or excellent those programs. But then maybe give one example of who you helped with that with that skill. For example, uh, let's say you've supported a sales team and you put 5 years proficient in Salesforce.com in Salesforce, and then maybe so just 5 years is specific, that gives it a little more, but then maybe a sub bullet: increased sales pipeline, contributed to improving sales pipeline by 57%. Just some sort of payoff. So you've made the generic a little more specific by putting some years in there, and then you've given an example of how your skill was used to create business value. Now, in terms of the other question, whether resume was, more than 2 pages, I totally agree. What you want to do is spend a couple things. Spend time really getting the language right. Take 10 words, make it 5 words, and cut out some of the fluff. So it goes back to what I said in the second thing we talked about today, identifying your key selling point. So let's say you had 4 pages of selling points. What you want to do is cherry pick, find the ones that create the most sizzle. Let's say that 20% that's got 80% of the impact, and then take those other ones out. So that was the exercise you went through, moving your resume from, I'm going to say 4 pages to 2. You went through that exercise of finding the ones with the most sizzle. So hopefully that answered that question.
Great, thank you, Roger. I don't see any other questions coming in. Let me see. I guess we could end it now since we've 2 minutes past.
Great. Yeah. My closing thought is it pays to reach out. I know as engineers, going to networking events, sending cold emails, picking up the phone, talking to neighbors, it's not the most fun thing for most of us, if we're honest. I'm telling you, gaining that muscle, building up the muscle, making it a habit, there's so much payoff when you expand your network and you have a list written down that you know what you're looking for. The universe does pull those opportunities to you. So those are my parting thoughts. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Roger. I just want to say thank you also to our audience for all your great questions as well and for attending. I do want to mention that we have additional webinars coming up over the next few weeks. On June 26th, noon Eastern Time, we'll have a webinar on the new U.S. Cyber Disclosure Regiment. Tell it early, tell it all, tell it yourself. And on July 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on powerful, persuasive presentation, advancing skills, advanced public speaking for engineers. And I believe that's going to be your webinar.
I'll be here. I'll be back. Yes. Can't get enough.
Excellent, excellent. Registration for this upcoming webinars are now open. Again, we will be emailing you a link to these future events along with the slides and recording of this webinar. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Perfect.